Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Fergal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to today's MedHeads show. Today we have Craig Payne, one of our regular guests. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, Fergal. And yourself?
Oh, very good, very good. So I suppose today we're going to take the opportunity of talking about connections and connectedness and how connections and connectedness impact upon the descent into substance use disorders and also how it facilitates the recovery from substance use disorders. So Craig, first of all, how would you define connection and connectedness? How would you define those terms?
Well, I don't know, but I suppose it's the opposite of isolation.
That's as good a definition as any, wouldn't you say? It's the opposite of isolation.
I reckon it is, and it's the addiction tends to lead to isolation, and tends to lead to the drop.
Does isolation lead to the addiction?
Well, it's who knows, chicken and egg, mate, chicken and egg. But either way, isolation becomes killer, and connection is a really important step in starting to progress forwards and re-establishing connections.
So another way of thinking about it might be that connectedness and isolation are different faces of the same coin. And as we experience a descent into substance use disorder, a lack of connection, which is isolation, then drives all the psychosocial complexity around substance use disorder. And then what we have to do when we're engaging in recovery is we have to flip that coin over and start focusing on social connectedness to then act as the engine to recovery or of recovery.
Yeah, and positive connections.
Connections.
There may be that. Yeah, because there may be connections present, but they're not necessarily positive, and getting people to see through that at times it can be really difficult.
Yeah. That's a useful segue to my next question then. How do you define a positive versus a negative connection, and how do people see the difference?
Oh, it's by the impact it's having on your life. But I think the further people go into addiction, the more they start to realize that, a common theme I hear is, they're not really friends, they're just people I use with, and that's starting to become a whole lot clearer to me, and so, the connections that they do have aren't having a positive impact on their life, and just slowly trying to work out with them, where they sit in things and what might be missing from their life, and whether they're getting everything they need from the connections they have, is where we start.
So you often hear the phrase, it started out when they got into the wrong group. They got into the wrong group of friends. What is it about people, or what is it about the wrong group of friends that makes people so attracted to the wrong group? Why are people who are vulnerable, I suppose I've just answered my own question as the vulnerability, but why are people who are vulnerable attracted in some way to the wrong group of friends?
I think it's just the search for connection, and people, we all want to be around people, and let's not forget too that the substance itself will also provide some sort of relief and some sort of positive feeling, and so the two can get confused because I'm around these people and I'm using a substance and I feel good while I'm doing it, So and maybe
we're all
these
using the substance, so we're all in it
and
together.
We're all in it together, and we're mates and we hang out and this is what we do together. And,
right.
Yeah.
So it's no different than going to, Sunday school, Bible class. We're all sharing in a common activity, a common goal. It just happens to be shooting heroin.
Absolutely. That's the common interest that's at hand. So, and the thing that keeps them bonded together.
So it's the perpetuating. It's a common activity, and also then the environment and the dependency associated with the drug use. Yeah.
Yeah, the shared experience.
How does it start? So if someone wakes up and says, you know what, I'm just going to hang around with a different set of people today than I normally do. How does this start?
Well, I don't think that necessarily develops that way. People don't necessarily seek out other drug users. It just happens that maybe it's at a moment of weakness, or maybe a moment at just a moment of vulnerability, as you said before, where something's offered and it's taken. And peer pressure plays a lot in this stuff. No one wants to be the outsider or the one left out. So you might be in a social situation and it's offered, and this is what happens. But and it just becomes, and then the connection's formed, and you keep going.
So in your experience then, is it just you were in the wrong place at the wrong time and someone offered it to you at a party? Is that the biggest reason why addiction starts, or that first use starts, or are there any other situations?
Well,
what do you think about
starts? Well, yeah.
What do you think about the idea of kind of index drugs and gateway drugs? I mean, does that form a part of this discussion? Starting on cannabis leads to, shooting up methamphetamine and heroin together.
Look, there's a pathway there, but it doesn't always start out that way. Some people do start on harder drugs. Some people do start on less drugs. Alcohol's never talked about as a gateway drug. Now, that's the most acceptable drug there is around. And people just start to look for something that helps them feel better. They see other people doing things that make them feel better. It looks like fun, looks like they're enjoying themselves. Oh, okay, maybe if I do that, I'll start to enjoy myself. It's generally just starting to look for something to make yourself feel better, because you're in a position where you're not feeling better. You're not feeling that great.
You're not feeling great.
Yeah. And it's the search for some relief.
So are you not feeling great because you don't have a healthy set of connections to begin with, or are you not feeling great for some other reason? Is it a lack of social connectedness to begin with?
No, because people can often come with great social connections, and excuse me, and people can start out with great social connections, but what happens over the course of time, or what tends to happen over the course of time, is that the longer they remain in use and in addiction, those social connections will drop off, because the overriding point of living becomes the addiction and the need for the substance. So people can often start off with quite healthy and connected lives, and just slowly those connections will start to drop off the further they fall into addiction.
So I often use the helicopter analogy when I'm thinking about, connectedness. So I think of, what's my immediate familial connection? So we've got family, so like spouse or children or parents. And then we've got immediate social circles. So then we've got extended family, relatives, and then we've got buddies that we hang out with, and we've got work colleagues. And then we've got forensic institutions, government institutions. And that's how I think about relationships between patients and their external world. I often find that when people start, descending into substance use disorder, that their social connections, it's like the tide coming in and out. The more tenuous the relationship is with someone, the more likely it is to be lost during the path towards the trapdoor falling in. So the last relationship to be destroyed really is kind of the immediate. Well, in my experience, it's the immediate relationship between spouse and family. Is that your experience? How would you define this loss of connectedness?
No, it can happen quite slowly. And as things start to fall off, maybe they start off with, they might play a lot of sport, they might be working, they might have lots of friends and some great things happening, but just start using drugs. And look, let's not forget the mental health side of things either. You know, maybe, you know, we look at and depression and anxiety and all these things, and I think they're major drivers as well, is because people are seeking some sort of relief from the situation that's been in, because I don't know, I think there's something within themselves that's just not sitting right at the time, and so there's this uneasiness, and they're looking for a relief from it. And yeah, drugs provide that, alcohol provides that. But if that becomes the main focus, and over time some of these connections drop off, the only thing that they can fall back on that they know will make them feel good is the substance or the behavior. So,
or the people with whom they share that substance and that behavior.
yeah, but then a lot of the time people may just, like, isolation in a room is a common part of the story, where they stop even seeing drug friends a lot of the time, because it can be a world where there's not a lot of trust, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of safety at times, and they start to realize that, oh, they're not my friends, and it'll just become days can become purely about the substance, and that's where the addiction's really fallen into that deepest darkest spot.
So you have patients who literally spend days on end in their own room taking drugs and nothing else, yeah?
Yeah, taking drugs and drinking alcohol. For some people, that'll be the only thing that gets them up in the morning. Yeah, alcohol especially. They'll get up, and a routine will be getting up, going to the bottle shop, and coming home, sitting there drinking, going out. And the only time they may get up and go out is to get more alcohol or a little bit of food, and that just becomes the daily cycle. And slowly, as the guilt and the shame sort of builds up over that, they just drop into that. They don't want to see anyone else. They don't want to answer the phone. They don't want to answer a knock on the door.
So how do you turn it around? What happens? What's the flip side of that? That's a very good description of isolation. What's the flip side?
One of the things I hear quite often, and being in recovery myself, I know it was part of my story. It was starting to reestablish those connections and starting to get some identity back. Slowly over time, if the only thing you're doing is using, or that's one of the few connections you have, there's a complete loss of identity. You look back at teenage years, people are playing sport, working, all these sorts of things, and slowly, if they've dropped off, it's starting to re-examine what the interests are, or what their interests used to be, and finding pathways back into that. If that's maybe going back to study, if that's chasing it, maybe they always wanted to, I don't know, be a builder, but never went down that path. So, all right, can we look at getting into apprenticeships? Can we look at just starting to get back to work slowly, instead of just jumping back into full-time work? Can we jump back into it 2 or 3 days at a time, and finding out where their interests lie, and then starting to navigate a path that way?
But at some point, there is a time when a patient who's using drugs all day long and nothing else has got to reach out to someone, has got to make a phone call. Where do drug services sit in that space?
Well, obviously, yeah, the most important part is asking for that help. And depending on the level of isolation, sometimes they're not able to do that themselves, but they might need a friend or family member to do that for them. And yeah, starting with that drug service is the way to go. Direct Line will get a lot of calls, and other services of just people looking for help and where to go. So, but yeah, definitely starting that conversation with a counsellor or with an intake clinician or someone around what might be needed and what that next step might be, which for in a lot of the times maybe a detox to start things, but definitely counselling to start to try and regulate it. And everyone's going to start at a different level. So some people will counseling may help them understand that the next level of treatment is needed.
So you've described relationships with therapists, and you've described relationships with employment, so, getting back into work. How important is it to reestablish connections with friends and family, loved ones?
Yeah, extremely important. We all want to be loved. We all want to feel close to someone. We all want to have people to call if we need to, and just to hang out with, and just to be around, and want healthy, loving relationships. So, and part of the recovery journey, a lot of the time we can start to rebuild those relationships and start to form more positive connections.
How do you do that? How do you tell someone who's had to watch their spouse descend into, the pits of despair and drug use? How do you say to them, they want to recover, they want to change, you need to be part of that? That can be quite challenging as well. That's a message that would be difficult to hear sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where boundaries are really important. Boundaries and communication.
Well, tell us more about that.
Well, for each friend, for each family member, the experience is going to have been different. So, and look, the boundaries we set within our personal relationships are all different. And but what are they willing to put up with? What do they need from the relationship? What lengths will they go to? Are they willing to help? Maybe someone wants to move back home. And housing's a big issue, and a big driver in addiction as well, in keeping some people stuck in addiction. So, maybe they want to come back home, but the family need to sit and have a conversation around what that looks like, and setting the boundaries on engagement in treatment, engagement in social activities, engagement in just even general behaviour and attitude around the house. Yeah.
Who has that conversation?
Well,
who's part of that conversation? Is it just between the family member and the patient, or does a therapist come in and get involved in that?
Well, a lot of the time it will just be between the family member and the patient, but definitely therapists can get involved in that situation as well.
Or at least the therapist can prepare the patient for that conversation. Is that another way of looking at it?
Yeah, absolutely, and start to work on them as to what boundaries are important, and what they need from the situation as well.
So I would imagine then that you would spend a lot of time talking to your patients about how to make these conversations and to acknowledge that these are valid concerns that their family members have about, no drug use, appropriate behavior, turning up on time, behaving yourself at work. These are valid concerns. It's not us trying to bully people. These are valid concerns that have to be dealt with.
No, absolutely. A big part of it is the patient actually taking ownership and responsibility for their past actions.
Yeah.
And you don't just get to waltz in and say, "Hey, I'm going into treatment now. Everyone forgive me and let's walk away." And this is a big part of things, is getting them to see and to try and understand why friends and family might be hesitant to allow them back in, and what they might need to offer. A lot of the time, if they can go to friends and family and say, "This is what I'm willing to offer. This is what I'm willing to work towards. I acknowledge that this has been, my past behaviours haven't been great, and this is what I've done." And get on the front foot with that. It can help. But also understanding that just because you say sorry doesn't mean that someone has to forgive you. There's consequences to the behaviours in addiction.
I was going to ask you, is forgiveness an automatic right?
No, definitely not.
It's not. Sometimes relationships are irrevocably broken.
Yep, and that's something that has to be accepted at times. Just because you say sorry, they don't have to accept that. It doesn't change the action. And a lot of the time, one of the messages I do try and get across is, this is going to take evidence. And maybe over the course of time there can be forgiveness, but
Yeah.
it may not happen straight away, and there's going to have to be a clear pattern of ongoing commitment to the recovery,
Yeah.
and clear pattern of changes in behavior and changes in attitudes.
Yeah.
And over the course of time, that evidence base may open up enough, and the boundaries can start to be shifted a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
So,
then we keep going from there.
so relatives, loved ones may be so shocked and just angry and resentful that they just aren't, they themselves aren't ready to forgive. But a lack of an immediate acknowledgement of forgiveness does not mean a permanent lack of forgiveness. That's what you're saying.
No, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It can change over the course of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it must be really difficult for someone to make that first phone call to say to their estranged partner, "I want to get clean." What does
Yeah.
that feel? How do you help someone in that situation?
You can sit with them, you can encourage them to do it, you can look at the positives of it, but also just trying to reinforce that message that unless they start to acknowledge their behaviors and start to move on and start to ask for the help, and accept the help and start to
Yeah.
change their attitudes towards help, that nothing's going to change.
And that's a very frightening concept, isn't it? I mean, surely it's just easier just to keep going with the drugs, isn't it?
Hey, it's not easy to own up to the mistakes you've made and
It's
the
not,
things you've
no.
done, and the broken promises, the
Yeah.
constant, and this is part of the thing. It's like, oh yeah, but this time will be different. This will be different. Oh, this time I'm going to do it this way. Yeah. And friends and family have heard it all before. And it's just,
Yeah.
no, mate, I need you to show me that it's going to be different. I need more than just words this time.
Yeah.
So this is what I need from you.
Yeah.
And if you start doing these things, then maybe let's talk about step 2, step 3, step 4, and we'll keep going from there.
Right. Because I'm putting myself in, imagining myself in that situation where I've had my life, the layers of my identity, the onion layers slowly ripped apart by drug use, and there's just basically me in a room, and that's it. And then I have to make a phone call to get help. And then all that help does is say, you need to own up to what a horrible person you've been, and you need to say, acknowledge your crimes, and then you need to reach out to the people that you have hurt the most. And that's what your recovery is going to be like. I mean, it's frightening. It's awful.
It is. It's very shameful, and it's rather than face up to all that, it's sometimes
so
easier for
much
people to just say, sitting in the room, and I'll just keep using,
Yeah. So we have to acknowledge the vulnerability that our patients live in on a daily basis. They are so fragile. And recovery is so fragile, isn't it?
It is. And this is why, again, it's reinforcing that this is a process, and it's going to be full of stops and starts. But again, that doesn't give the person the right to relapse.
Yes.
If they do lapse or do relapse, it's got to be taken as a learning opportunity. And that's where that guilt and shame can build up again, and it's hard, very hard to reach out and it's been hard to put the hand up in the first place.
Yeah.
So how do you go when you've been rebuilding these relationships and then say, I fucked up again?
I fucked up again, yes. That's awful.
It is, but I don't want to stay here. So I need you to know that I fucked up, but let's move. I need your help to move forwards from this. And hopefully this is something that over the course of time, where that evidence base has been shown, and they've shown the improvement and they've shown the things they're working towards. But because let's not. We've touched on relapse. It can happen at any stage, and it can happen at a just any sort of trigger.
At a moment's notice.
Exactly. But if we've established some positive relationships, we don't need to stay stuck there.
Yeah.
We can feel a little bit more comfortable about approaching a loved one and saying, hey, it's happened. I don't want to stay here. Like, can help me move forwards again.
So I want to talk a little bit now about the perspective of the loved one, right? So there you are for the last 5 years. you've seen your spouse, your child, the special person in your life descend into depravity. And every time you've said to this person, just pull yourself together, you know what you've got to do. And then you say to them, oh, I don't want you using it in the house. If you use one more time, you're going to be kicked out. And so then they get arrested by the police, and then they're kicked out, and it's you never come again. And then you say, oh, we're going to lock them up, throw away the key. They're dead to us, right? And then they get a phone call maybe a year later, or 6 months later. I don't know. Sometime later they get a phone call from that same person. Hello, I'm going to come clean. That too is also a very challenging phone call to receive. And the point I want to make here is that we both know, we all know, anyone working in drug and alcohol services knows that reaching out to people in addiction is one of the most important things that you can do, but it's also one of the hardest things to do. You need to, if you want your loved one to get better, you need to, just as much as they're reaching out to you, you need to reach out to them. And that's really difficult to swallow, because this is the same person that you're reaching out to that has completely screwed up their life and perhaps your life for the last 5 to 10 years. So what would you say to that?
Again, I think that falls into the category of, hey, say if that was a phone call to say, hey, I've cleaned up my act and I want to come back. Like, let's say it was a broken marriage, and I've cleaned up my act. I want to come back. Things have changed. Blah blah. That's not enough, because there's been a life full of broken promises before that, and maybe the partner in that case, or ex-partner, can say, look, I'm here to support you, but this doesn't mean that I'll take you back. If there's ways that I can support you, because sometimes that relationship has been fractured to a point that there is no repair. And there needs to be an acceptance of that, and there's a grieving process associated with that. And so forgiveness doesn't always mean that things go back to the way they were. You can forgive someone, but you still need to enforce your boundaries and make sure that you're safe within that relationship too, and protected.
Is there a role for therapists in helping the family members, the loved ones of patients with drug addiction, just as much as there is a therapist for a patient with drug addiction? Is there a therapist for the family?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why organisations exist. Around Shark do a lot of things around family drug help. There's the family drug help lines, support lines, and then you've got Al-Anon and Narc-Anon as well, which are for family members suffering with a loved one suffering addiction. And it's an opportunity to share experiences and learn from other people going through the same thing.
So there is an established body of therapy that acknowledges the needs of the family, not just the needs of the patient, but also the needs of the family, because supporting for the family is as important almost as supporting the patient.
Oh, absolutely. Addiction's a really selfish disease, and it's easy for the person in addiction to think that it's all about them. But, and a lot of the time you understand the impact it's had on friends and family. But no, this has major impacts. And there's that thought, I'm only hurting myself by doing this. Yeah. Well, actually not. This is having far-reaching effects on relationships and on other people who can't understand why that, as a mother or a father, they can't understand why it's not enough, or why they can't help. And so they need some education and support around the fact too that they can't be the ones that solve this either, and support in going through that, because it must be a horrible thing to watch as a parent.
So we're run out of time. But tell me, can you give us one final message of hope around connectedness?
Yeah, relationships can be repaired with some ownership and some heart, and a willingness to commitment to treatment. Things can turn around, and the isolation can turn around. You can find the joy in life again in just trying to fill life with some of the meaningful activities that you used to.
Craig, as always, thank you for your pearls of wisdom. See you soon.
Cheers, Fergal.
That's all for today's MedHeads. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and thank you for joining us.